Royals, Nobles, and Mistresses with Syphilis. From sex-crazed libertines to noble courtesans to innocent empresses, syphilis was a devastating disease which ravaged many and sometimes changed the course of history. Let's meet 10 royal and noble victims of this sexually transmitted infection. First, a little historic sex ed. Syphilis is a bacterial infection which most often spreads through sexual contact. Symptoms include fever, headache, muscle pain, rashes, and sores, which, if left untreated, can severely disfigure the face and body. After a few weeks or months, symptoms disappear, but the bacteria remains dormant in the body. It can come raging back years later with dementia, dysfunction of multiple organs, intense pain, and death. The first recorded outbreak in Europe began in 1495, 3 years after Columbus made contact in America. It struck down French soldiers who were celebrating their invasion of Naples with local sex workers. As the scourge spread, it became known as the French disease. But the actual origins of syphilis have long been debated, leading to two main theories. One, that Columbus's men contracted the disease from Native Americans. Europeans infected indigenous Americans with a host of deadly diseases, including measles, mumps, smallpox, diphtheria, influenza, typhoid, and the common cold. In some places, as much as 90% of the native population was wiped out. Some see syphilis as a small dose of cosmic justice. But the second theory postulates that syphilis already existed in Europe for centuries. Signs of its ravages have been found in ancient burial sites in Europe and Africa. From the 16th through 19th centuries, syphilis was a massive public health problem. Those infected turned to the only treatment available, mercury. But ingesting this toxic element was often worse than the disease itself. It caused anxiety, mood swings, memory loss, depression, tremors, and a host of other problems. The threat of syphilis did have one upside. Men who frequented brothels popularized the condom. Let's put some recognizable faces to the many thousands unfortunate enough to suffer the untreated effects of syphilis. Lorenzo de' Medici, Duke of Urbino, was born in 1492 into the powerful and wealthy Medici family, who had risen from bankers to popes and nobles. He grew bored of the Republic of Florence, so he talked his uncle, Pope Leo X, into lending him an army to conquer Urbino. While living the soldier's life, Lorenzo likely purchased the services of a sex worker, like those who had been the victims of the first syphilis outbreak just 20 years earlier. Once he won Urbino and installed himself as Duke, he settled down with French noblewoman Madeleine de la Tour. She gave birth to a daughter, Catherine, and the couple were as delighted as if she had been a son. But by then, both were seriously ill. Madeleine, weakened by childbirth, died just 2 weeks after the delivery. She was 21. Lorenzo held on for another week. He died at 26. Little Catherine was left orphaned and held prisoner in a convent while the Holy Roman Emperor attacked Florence. But eventually her cousin, Pope Clement, rescued her. He arranged her marriage to King Henri II, and Catherine de' Medici became Queen of France. Lorenzo also left behind an illegitimate son, Alessandro. He had unfashionable tanned skin, and it was rumored that his mother had been an enslaved Moor. Alessandro became Duke of Florence, but he was lured into a sexual encounter with a beautiful woman, only to be assassinated. His cousin, Maria Salviati de' Medici, used her influence to ensure that her own son, Cosimo I, was elected the next Duke of Florence. She was born in 1499 and was married to her Medici cousin, Ludovico. He was a bit of a ne'er-do-well. He committed his first murder at the age of 12 and was banished from Florence. He formed a band of dreaded mercenaries and was hired by his cousins, Pope Leo X and Clement VII, to eliminate their enemies. It is likely that while marauding around Italy, he contracted syphilis and passed it on to his wife, Maria. Ludovico did not live to suffer the ravages of syphilis. During a battle, he was shot in the leg. The limb was amputated, but he died of gangrene 5 days later. Maria was widowed at 27. She wore the garb of a nun for the rest of her life. Once she secured her only child's control over Florence, she retreated to the Villa de Castillo to raise Cosimo and Alessandro's illegitimate daughters, Bia and Giulia. Maria had a strong interest in medicine. She was an unsung hero in the development of the medical profession in Renaissance Italy. She passed new texts along to physicians and developed her own remedies. She used some of these to treat and conceal her own symptoms. She suffered headaches, ulcers, and proctorrhagia. Maria died in 1542 at the age of 44. In recent years, her remains have been examined by archaeologists. Her skull shows signs of lytic brain lesions caused by tertiary syphilis. Enough with picking on the Medicis. Abbas II of Persia, Shah of Iran, was born in 1632. He inherited the throne at 9, and by 15 he pushed out his father's Grand Vizier and took power. His reign was a time of significant progress. He avoided war with the Ottomans, but won victories against the Mughals and the Russian Empire. He was famed for his tolerance and sense of justice, and his people enjoyed safety. Abbas celebrated with luxurious parties, at which wine flowed freely. He drank from a golden cup, a gift from the Russian Tsar, which was inlaid with uncut rubies. But he became frustrated with economic problems he could not solve. The Shah lost himself to drinking, sex, and parties. After especially wild ragers, he retreated from the public for weeks. Abbas had a large harem of concubines, women who had been captured and enslaved from other nations. It is not clear how the Shah was infected with syphilis, or if members of his harem were also suffering. By 1666, the 34-year-old Shah was in terrible health. He died of syphilis and left the declining empire to his eldest son, Shah Mirza. John Wilmot, Earl of Rochester, was born in 1647. His father was a Cavalier hero of the Civil War and was created Earl of Rochester. John inherited the earldom at 11, and King Charles II took a paternal role in his life. At 13, John attended Oxford University, where he, quote, grew debauched. After graduation, he went on a 3-year grand tour of France and Italy, where he was exposed to new philosophy. Back in England, the king encouraged him to court Elizabeth Millay, a wealthy heiress and a great beauty. She was into him, but her family objected to her marrying the poor Earl. So John and his mother abducted her. They hoped the scandal would force a marriage, but Elizabeth was rescued and John was thrown in the Tower of London. He was released only after he apologized to the furious king. He hoped to redeem himself by serving in the Second Dutch War. He became a battlefield hero, and upon his return, the king appointed him a gentleman of the bedchamber. Elizabeth was also impressed, and she eloped with John. They had 4 children and enjoyed a quiet, happy life at their country estate. But when John was in London, he forgot about his family and behaved as a heedless rake. He was part of the Merry Gang, the most popular clique at the Restoration Court. They were favored by the king, who often joined in their drunkenness, vivacious conversation, and extravagant frolics. Among John's many lovers was actress Nell Gwynn. When she became the king's mistress, she and John remained friends, and her influence helped him. He promoted the career of another mistress, Elizabeth Barry, who became the greatest actress of the age. They had a daughter together, but John grew jealous of her fame and broke it off. In between debaucheries, the Earl wrote poetry and satire and was considered one of the greatest wits of court. He was particularly fond of tongue-lashing self-righteous Puritans. The Earl's antics often walked the line between hilarious and offensive. He went too far when his play, which rather hypocritically poked fun at the king's obsession with sex, was performed right in front of His Majesty. John was kicked out of court. He next appeared in London as a mountebank named Dr. Bindo. He claimed he could cure any woman of infertility. He often assumed the role of matronly Mrs. Bindo so he could examine young wives in private without arousing their husband's suspicions. Many of his patients did successfully conceive, likely because John himself was their surreptitious sperm donor. By 33, John was suffering tertiary syphilis. His initial infection had been years earlier and remained dormant while he infected who knows how many other people. The disease then flared up again with a vengeance. He lost his handsome looks, his nose was eaten away, and he became blind and incontinent. On his deathbed, his mother brought in a priest, who later claimed to have converted him. John died in 1680. He was portrayed by Johnny Depp in a 2005 film, The Libertine. Joseph I, Holy Roman Emperor, was born in 1678, the eldest son of Emperor Leopold I. As heir to the throne, he surrounded himself with forward-thinking advisors and beautiful women. Joseph had a passion for parties and love affairs. When he was 21, his mother, Empress Eleanor, decided to settle him down. She selected Wilhelmina Amalia of Brunswick-Lüneburg. She was 5 years Joseph's senior, pious and serious. After she submitted to a medical examination to confirm that she was fertile, the couple were married in a spectacular ceremony. They were happy together for a few months. Joseph soon grew bored of his bride and went back to his wanton ways. Whenever the Archduke went out hunting, his friend Count Lamberg provided an attractive young peasant girl. Noble ladies were also lining up to sleep with the heir. He had a long-term relationship with Countess Marianne Palffy and named her his official mistress. This caused a scandal. Royal mistresses were not the done thing in Austria. Where did he think he was? France? Even the Pope complained, and Empress Eleanor had her son's procurer thrown in prison. But once Joseph inherited the throne in 1705, nothing could temper his amours. Despite all the bedroom exertions, Joseph found time for his wife. She delivered 3 children, but their only son, Leopold, died of hydrocephalus before his first birthday. It was vital that Wilhelmina deliver a Habsburg heir. But Joseph contracted syphilis, reportedly from the daughter of a gardener, and he promptly passed the disease on to his wife. She naively assumed her symptoms were caused by some impurity in herself. She prayed for health and to deliver an heir, but got neither. The infection rendered her infertile. The dynastic pressure was transferred to his younger brother, Charles, and more specifically, his wife Elizabeth. Their only son, Leopold Johann, died at just 7 months. Charles filled his wife's apartments with erotic images of male beauty, believing this would spark her imagination and cause her to produce a masculine child. Her doctors put her on a diet of daily liquor and rich foods to increase her fertility. She became obese and alcohol dependent. She had 3 more babies, all daughters. Emperor Joseph spent the 6 years of his reign fighting fruitlessly with the Spanish and expelling Romani people from his empire. In the end, it wasn't syphilis but smallpox that got him. On his deathbed, he swore to his long-suffering wife that if he survived, he would remain faithful. He didn't have to keep that promise. He died in 1711, age 32. He had signed a pact naming his brother Charles as his heir, but agreeing that Joseph's daughters would be next in line. Once emperor, Charles VI got to work disinheriting his nieces and securing his daughter, Maria Theresa's reign. So, if it wasn't for syphilis, the Holy Roman Empire might not have gotten one of its greatest rulers. Sally Salisbury was born Sarah Pryden around 1692 to a London bricklayer. She was apprenticed to a seamstress, but when she lost a valuable piece of lace, she ran away and began living on the streets. She sold pamphlets to students and apprentices, which was a cover for her lucrative sideline of charging young men half a crown for an hour of her time. Sarah was noted for her beauty and wit. She soon found a place at Mother Wisebourne's house, one of the most expensive and exclusive brothels in London. There she changed her name to the more fun and sophisticated Sally Salisbury. She catered to a who's who of noble clientele: the Duke of Richmond, Nell Gwyn's son, the Duke of St. Albans, and even the future King George II were among her lovers. In 1722, Sally was having dinner in a tavern with John Finch, son of the Earl of Nottingham. They got into an argument over opera tickets, and Sally picked up her knife and stabbed him in the chest. She was immediately remorseful and called for a surgeon. John languished for a time, but recovered and went straight to see Sally in jail and repair their friendship. But the court charged her with assault, and she was sentenced to a year in dreaded Newgate prison. Sally's wealthy clients did not abandon her. She was sent luxurious gifts and received numerous visitors. But she had contracted syphilis, and inside the prison, her health deteriorated. 9 months in, she died of, quote, brain fever brought on by debauch. She was buried in a local churchyard. She was 33. Lola Montez, Countess of Landsfeld, was born Eliza Rosanna Gilbert in 1821 in Castle Oliver, Ireland. Her parents descended from the landed gentry. They immigrated to India, where her father promptly died of cholera. Her 19-year-old mother married a lieutenant. From a young age, Eliza was a mischief maker. Her parents hoped sending her back to Scotland to live with her stepfather's family might temper her behavior. There she was called the queer, wayward little Indian girl. She stuck flowers in the wig of an elderly man during church and ran through the streets naked. She was sent to boarding school, but at 16 she eloped with Lieutenant Thomas James. He took her back to India, but within 5 years their marriage broke down. Eliza left her husband to become a professional dancer. She made her London debut under the name Lola Montez, the Spanish dancer. She had jet black hair and striking blue eyes, but she was about as Spanish as Taco Bell is Mexican. She toured European capitals and settled in Paris. Like many thespians of her day, she picked up extra cash doing private performances for wealthy gentlemen. She had an affair with 19th century rock star pianist Franz Liszt, and he introduced her into the bohemian art scene. She became friends with George Sand and had an affair with Three Musketeers author Alexandre Dumas. Newspaper owner and drama critic Alexandre Dujardin became her boyfriend. His gushing reviews helped her career, but at a party, he grew jealous and challenged another man to a duel. Dujardin was shot and killed. With her boyfriend dead, Lola decided it was time to get out of Paris. She moved to Munich, where her dancing grabbed the attention of King Ludwig I of Bavaria. According to rumor, when he first met her, he asked if her breasts were real. Lola responded by pulling down her dress to prove that they were. This was before the invention of implants. Ludwig showered Lola with gifts, including making her Countess of Landsfeld. This did not go down well with the Bavarian people, who resented the courtesan's political influence. She had strong liberal and anti-Catholic views and got Ludwig to dismiss his conservative cabinet. When students at Munich University protested, Lola convinced Ludwig to close the school. In 1848, revolution broke out, and Ludwig was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Maximilian II. Lola fled to Switzerland, where she waited for her lover to join her, but he never arrived. She moved back to London and married George Heald, a young officer who had recently come into a large inheritance. But Lola's first divorce did not permit remarriage. The couple fled a bigamy charge, and Heald died of tuberculosis 3 years in. Lola decided to make a fresh start in the United States. She was a sensation all the way to California, where many lonely men were flush from the gold rush. There she married husband number 3, Patrick Hull, but within months he sued for divorce. The doctor he accused of being her lover turned up murdered. Lola crossed the ocean for Australia. At the Theatre Royal in Melbourne, she performed an erotic spider dance and pulled her skirts high enough to reveal she wore no undergarments. Gold miners loved it, but the general public was appalled. Lola received abysmal reviews and went after a critic with a whip. On her way back to San Francisco, her manager fell overboard and was lost at sea. Lola tried to make a comeback in the U.S., but audiences weren't interested. Instead, she lived quietly in Brooklyn and spent her time helping abused women. By the age of 38, she was suffering serious symptoms of tertiary syphilis, and her body was wasting away. Lola died in 1861, age 39. Luís I, King of Portugal, was born in 1838, the second son of Queen Maria II. He never expected to be king because he had an older brother, Pedro, who inherited the throne at 16 after their mother died in childbirth. Luís spent his time in intellectual and cultural pursuits. He translated many of Shakespeare's works into Portuguese and used his linguistic skills to charm many young ladies. Luís was quite content living as a playboy prince until 1861, when a typhoid fever or cholera pandemic carried off his elder brother, Pedro V, and his younger brothers, Fernando and João. Suddenly, Luís was king, and the Braganza dynasty was in desperate need of new heirs. He wrote to his cousin, Queen Victoria, and his great-uncle, King Leopold I of Belgium, to ask their advice. Both agreed that he should marry Maria Theresa of Austria, but her father declined as she was only 16. Luís instead married Maria Pia of Savoy. She was only 14, but her father, the King of Italy, was happy for her to become Queen of Portugal. Maria was smitten with her handsome, artistic groom. By 18, she had given birth to 2 sons and was a devoted mother. But her admiration faded when she became aware of the many other women with whom she was sharing her husband, particularly actress Rosa Damasceno. The queen took frequent trips out of the country, where she may have met up with her own lovers. Somewhere along the way, Luís contracted syphilis. The infection remained dormant for several years, but in 1887, symptoms flared up and evolved into neurosyphilis. This advanced stage causes physical and cognitive impairments, depression, irritability, headaches, and seizures. Luís suffered a great deal before dying in 1889, aged 50. Rudolf, Crown Prince of Austria, was born in 1858. He was the long-awaited son of Emperor Franz Joseph I and Empress Elizabeth, aka Sissy. He grew up close to his sister, Gisela, but the siblings were separated when Rudolf was just 6, so he could begin his education. His tutor was physically and emotionally abusive. As a young man, the Archduke was a bon vivant and behaved recklessly and promiscuously. To calm him down, his parents arranged his marriage to Princess Stephanie of Belgium. He was 23 and she 17. When he traveled to Brussels to meet his bride, his latest mistress came with him. The newlyweds were initially happy, but domesticity did not curb Rudolf's wild side. When Stephanie delivered a daughter, he did not hide his disappointment. Rudolf became increasingly unstable, drank heavily, and engaged in even more affairs. He became seriously ill with both gonorrhea and syphilis. His doctors prescribed opium, cognac, morphine, and mercury, which may have affected him neurologically. They sent him to recuperate on the island of La Cromo. He brought his wife with him in the hopes that a vacation might rekindle their affection. Rudolf was fully aware that he had contracted his illnesses from sex, but he continued to sleep with Stephanie in hopes of siring an heir. When she began to feel symptoms, doctors told her it was a stomach flu. After intensive treatment, she recovered, but the disease had destroyed her fallopian tubes, and she was unable to bear children. When she realized that she had been betrayed by her husband, she was furious. Rudolf attempted to reconcile, but she refused to ever sleep with him again. She fell in love with a Polish count and did not hide her feelings. Rudolf was prone to mood swings and violent public outbursts. By now, everyone at court knew that the crown prince's marriage and his health were in shambles. Stephanie grew concerned about his suicidal thoughts. She went to her father-in-law to try and get him help, but the emperor brushed her off. Meanwhile, Rudolf went to his mistress, actress Missy Kaspar. He told her his plan to end his own life and begged her to join him. She refused and went to the police, but her report was ignored. Missy herself later died of syphilis. Not wanting to end his life alone, Rudolf turned to another mistress, 17-year-old Baroness Mary Vetsera. She was obsessed with a 30-year-old crown prince and romanticized their relationship as star-crossed lovers. On January 29th, the emperor and empress hosted a family dinner party. Rudolf excused himself early to travel to his hunting lodge in Mayerling. On January 30th, 1889, when his valet went to wake him up, he found the door locked. The party broke down the door and found Mary on the bed, already in rigor mortis, and Rudolf sitting on the floor, bleeding from the mouth. It was later determined that he shot her, then sat by her bedside for several hours before shooting himself. The murder-suicide was covered up. Mary's family were called upon to sneak her out of the lodge. Her corpse was propped up in a carriage with a broomstick and promptly buried in a local potter's field. It was claimed that the crown prince had died of an aneurysm so that he could be buried in the imperial crypt. Archduke Otto Franz Joseph of Austria was born in 1865 to Emperor Franz Josef's younger brother, Archduke Karl Ludwig. Otto paid poor attention in lessons and pulled pranks on his tutors. Still, they preferred him to his stern older brother, Franz Ferdinand. His wild behavior continued into adulthood. His reputation as a Lothario was cemented by stories of him charging into a dining room naked and scandalizing a visiting British peeress, and entering the room of a lady wearing nothing but a sword. He became a pariah at court, and even his wife, Princess Maria Josepha of Saxony, avoided him. At 35, Otto contracted syphilis from one of his many lovers. In excruciating pain, he withdrew from public life and moved to Egypt for a year of respite. But he had to return to Vienna for medical treatment. He lost his nose and wore a rubber prosthetic. Otto died in 1906, age 41. After his cousin Rudolf's suicide, his father and then his brother Franz Ferdinand became heir presumptive to the Austrian imperial throne. In 1914, the unpopular heir was touring Sarajevo when he was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist. The death of the Habsburg heir sparked World War I. Emperor Franz Joseph died in 1916. If Otto had still been alive, he would have been emperor, though probably not a very popular one. Instead, his son, Charles I, inherited the throne. His reign lasted only 2 years. When Austria lost World War I in 1918, the Habsburg monarchy was overthrown. Charles was exiled to the island of Madeira. He spent the rest of his life trying to restore the monarchy, but to no avail. He died of respiratory failure in 1922, age 34. In 1928, Scottish scientist Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. While syphilis is still around today, it can now be effectively treated with antibiotics. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other history videos. You can also join my Patreon to support my work and get early access to all of my multi-part series. Thank you for watching.